Okay.
A library presentation. Me to help cover medical expenses, kids shoveling their neighbors' walks, retirees volunteering at a school or a scouting troop, a food pantry at a church, or maybe it's a childhood memory of your family coming together to support elderly relatives or new parents or a grieving cousin. Yes? Oh, I'm blocking the screen. Okay. Can the camera see me if I'm here?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for letting me know.
I'm sorry, hold on for a moment.
Sure.
They're still not hearing the audio. I'm not sure what to do about it. Okay, how about now? I'll see audio again. Okay, so again, everybody can hear me now? Please chime in if you can. Okay, all right, yes, let's start from the top.
Okay, take two, no worries. So hi, again. I'm Elizabeth. I'm one of the co-founders of Mutual Oranges. We're a group of people in and around the Oranges in Essex County, coming together in mutual aid. We started with our first public event at East Orange Library at the beginning of this year, and we're delighted to be wrapping up here at another library presentation. So Mutual aid is not a phrase most of us heard growing up, but there's probably a picture, an image that came to mind the first time you heard the phrase. Maybe it's a GoFundMe to help cover medical expenses, a food pantry at a church, maybe it's kids shoveling snow for their neighbors, maybe it's a childhood memory of family coming together to take care of an aging relative, to share childcare, trade babysitting. Mutual aid can absolutely include all of these things. It is about regular people coming together to cooperate and help each other overcome day-to-day struggles. It can include sharing money, books, tools, gardening supplies to help each other get through financially hard times, sharing our knowledge and skills, or coming together to learn new skills with each other. It can include building relationships and networks of community care. So we all have more people to turn to when things are rough, and more people to offer the help that we have to offer. One other essential piece of mutual aid, though, beyond coming together to cooperate and help each other overcome day-to-day struggles, is learning together about the underlying causes of those struggles. The political education and societal analysis to understand the underlying causes. That educational piece can look like book clubs and discussion groups, teach-ins, bystander trainings, community education on undoing racism, alternatives to capitalism, challenging fascism. One thing most of us did hear about growing up is the idea of charity. And one of the most common questions people involved with mutual aid work get is, okay, I keep hearing solidarity, not charity, but what does that mean? What is the difference between mutual aid and charity? So with charity, all support flows in one direction, from the haves to the have-nots. There are bosses or board members making decisions about who deserves support. There are a lot of rules to follow about who can receive help and how. With mutual aid, it's reciprocal. We all give and we all receive. There's no boss. Everyone gets a say in how resources are shared or what projects are a priority. There is no one labeled undeserving. Everyone deserves food, water, a roof over their heads, a roof over their heads, safety, community, an opportunity to support and to be supported. Charity also tends to be missing the education and analysis piece, looking to understand the underlying causes of systemic injustice. And mutual aid is also grounded in relationship in a way that charity doesn't tend to be. The history of mutual aid. So the term was coined by Peter Kropotkin. He was an anarchist philosopher in the early 1900s. And he argued that it is cooperation that helps humans survive this long, not competition. That the history of human culture is a history of mutual aid, of working together to care for each other and meet each other's needs. The current discussion going on in our culture today about mutual aid comes out of books, including those of Dean Spade that have been recently published. But mutual aid has existed long before the term was coined and exists far outside the current conversation. Navajo kinship networks, KET, are centered in the recognition that in being in relationship with each other, we are responsible to and for each other. It involves a careful balance of reciprocity that needs to be intentionally maintained. Taking care of someone in your extended kinship network is as automatic as taking care of someone in your household.
Elizabeth, real quick,
Yes.
I'm going to turn off the middle lights so that
Sure.
the screen is easier for people at home to see. Hold on, which of these is better? Actually, I think the middle light on, the other one's off. It's hard to say. No, the other way. Okay,
Okay,
great. Thank you so much. Sorry.
sure, it's okay. So that was Navajo Kinship Networks. The Free African Society of Philadelphia was founded in 1787 by a group of free black men to provide support for free Africans and their descendants. This included enslaved folks who had escaped slavery, folks who had been freed from slavery in the years after the Revolutionary War, and refugees from the Haitian Revolution. The society offered education and apprenticeship to young people, social and economic guidance, and medicinal care. With every wave of immigrants to the U.S., there has also been a wave of mutual aid organizations and fraternal societies. The Ancient Order of Hibernians, founded by Irish Catholic immigrants, the Sons of Italy, founded by Italian immigrants, Landsmannschaften, founded by Jewish immigrants. Societies often helped families start businesses, provided assistance when family members were injured or killed on the job, and helped with funeral expenses. In the 1980s, the PWA Coalition was formed by folks living with AIDS. At the height of hostility and discrimination towards people with AIDS, the coalition offered housing, food, and community to people who'd been rejected and abandoned by society, by the government. And of course, one of the most well-known mutual aid endeavors is the Black Panther Party's Free Breakfast for Children's program. Founded in 1969, it was based on the assertion that kids would do better in school if they started the day with a healthy, filling breakfast. The BPP's survival programs also included health clinics and freedom schools, directly addressing issues of hunger, class oppression, and racism. So we've talked a little about what mutual aid is and isn't. We talked a little about some of the examples throughout history. And you might be thinking, okay, I get the theory, I get the history, I'm in, but where do I start? So you start where you are. You start with the communities you're already part of. You start with the communities you're already part of. Your workplace, the block you live on, your group chat, your church choir, your board game group. What unmet needs are you and your community experiencing? Food insecurity, transportation needs, childcare, support dealing with healthcare and insurance companies, home repairs, loneliness. Reach out to your community to see who's interested in joining you. And you know your community best. Do you think they'd be interested in coming together to read a book or an article about mutual aid, to watch one of the videos on the Shareable website? Or do you think they would respond better to a call to direct action and immediate action? Aging alone sucks. What can we do to support each other to help it suck less? And let the political analysis grow from there. Why are so many people aging alone, and what is it about our society that makes it suck so bad? Once you've got your people, start brainstorming a list of projects you'd like to work on and come up with one to start with. There are so many needs going unmet, and it's so energizing to be surrounded by people who are like-minded, like, yes, let's make change. It's going to be very tempting to start everything at once. I strongly encourage you to pick one to start with, because that will let you have an early success, and you can then learn from what went well, what you want to do differently next time, and use that success and satisfaction and energy to keep growing sustainably, rather than letting your early energy peter out in a dozen different directions. You can also look nearby to see if there are folks already doing the work that you're interested in doing that you can join or learn from. There are so many folks doing such amazing work, and we absolutely can all be learning from each other. One of the hallmarks of mutual aid is that decisions are made by and in community. Sometimes that means voting a majority rule, but more often it means consensus-based decision-making. Consensus, really quick and dirty definition of a consensus, is it is when the group talks and listens and keeps working together until we come up with a plan that everybody's willing to try. Consensus can feel complicated and scary if you haven't done it before, but going with a consensus-based decision-making structure is likely to make the final decision stronger, and it's likely to make the community stronger. Another important piece of mutual aid, community building and connection are as important as the practical projects. Build rituals together. Get to know each other as individuals. Remember that everyone wants to feel seen, accepted, and needed. And grow from there in reaching the larger community with events that emphasize both the work that you want to do, changing the world, and the connections that you're making with each other. One last note before we shift into our next piece, and that's laying a solid foundation for a mutual aid group. That involves a lot of things that go beyond our conversation today. Setting shared values and community guidelines, deciding on your approach to conflict resolution, compassionate communication, and de-escalation, considering how to work with different communication styles, ask versus guest culture, people who prefer text versus spoken communication, keeping access needs in mind to make sure to include as many folks as possible by offering hybrid options, accessible locations, masking at events, and so on. You don't need to have all those pieces in place at the beginning, but if you keep them in mind as you set things up and as you grow, it'll make for a stronger, more resilient, and more inclusive community. Yay!
Thank you. And if you're interested in connecting with us, this is our link tree, which you can also get through the QR code. Yeah. Thanks. At least I hope the QR code works. Watch me just have claimed that it's functioning.
It's working.
It's working?
Oh,
okay,
great.
thank
Excellent.
goodness.
Excellent.
Ah.
There's your website.
Excellent.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay. So with that,
I want to connect with people to share like resources and stuff. I want to start not one but two innovative homeless shelters,
Awesome.
wow.
Awesome.
in which people can stay as long as they want instead of just staying one night and getting kicked out again. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you interested in starting the homeless shelters?
Well, this is going to sound cuckoo a little bit, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to afford it because I don't know when my real estate career is going to take off or anything. But there's this.
You to keep your mask on?
Oh,
Thank you.
all right. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. So,
I can hear you back here. So.
Yeah, we can hear you.
anyway, basically, there's this section of Woodbridge called the Kearney section. It's just like a small section that used to be a small town in the 1920s. And there's a small church there that used to be my grandmother's church because her father was the pastor. It's abandoned now and they don't know what to do with it. I'm thinking we can have like a community of for a whole entire community for homeless people with a church right there in the community.
That's a good idea. I think we've seen similar attempts in New Brunswick to varying degrees of success, and I think I was involved a bit with some of the early stages where stuff in Trenton trying something similar. So if you'd like to speak more on that later, I'd be up for speaking further. I know Patterson, there were some attempts. There were a few attempts in Philly. I remember one that succeeded for Community Land Trust. Let me follow up on that. It will connect into where we're focusing in regards to our retreat. So let's follow up on, I guess, the prior discussion on what mutual aid is more generally. In regards to our community, we focused a lot on solidarity and solidarity formation between different communities already existing. A lot of existing mutual aid historically is very effective when it's done within a particular community. For example, a lot of the prior examples were a particular ethnic community or a particular worker demographic, a particular segment where there's already a lot of that connection, and that's often historically where mutual aid is formed. The recent trend of mutual aid over the last 6 years or so has been one that's been more intentional, and this provides us a lot of opportunity in regards to connecting between communities rather than just existing ones. There have already been such connections in the past, for example, connections between labor groups and tenant groups. One good example is in the 1930s, during the period of the Great Depression, there was a lot of attempts at mutual aid because that was the only method to survive. Between unemployed workers, some of the still remaining unions that were more radical, and some of the tenant councils and tenant unions that started to form in that period. They would do things like try to block foreclosures, do anti-eviction blockades, and that kind of mutual aid work was in a very difficult situation. They were risking against the police, but because of massive power, and they still were relying on existing communities. For example, existing community of tenant farmers, existing community of workers. They were able to get together and prevent someone from having their home be foreclosed because a neighbor would pitch in, and then they would buy out the house, and then the workers as a group would threaten anyone coming in if you are going to take this person's house away, and then that way one person would be able to buy it and give it back to the original. So a lot of these existing examples of mutual aid, all the way back to like the 1600s with the compagnons in France to like different mutual worker benefit societies across the world, are in existing communities, and we're hoping to push further beyond this to connections. And this is where we ran into some of the issues that you mentioned before, is that going into many different directions at the same time will lead to risk, burnout, and so we refocus on building connections one at a time. We started at the height of the COVID pandemic, and we had those same considerations. How do we do this as solidarity, not charity? How do we build within communities? How do we build a strong community? How do we build between communities that already exist? For example, in this area in Central Jersey, it was a bit too ambitious maybe to do the entire region as a whole, but there are significant populations of Latin workers, significant populations of Chinese workers, of Filipino workers, of Haitian workers, and of domestic English-speaking white workers and black workers. And there's like some areas there's a connection, some areas there's some like low-level racial tension, some areas there's like higher-level conflicts and stuff like that. And so trying to bridge these gaps and going to existing groups that already do mutual aid and other work as well is part of what we try to do to varying degrees of success. And we'll get a bit into it. The basic goals at the start, were at the very beginning, were the same as most mutual aid groups. During the pandemic, it was reactive to the conditions of people getting laid off or people losing work, providing immediate groceries, immediate concern, hygiene matters. And so we ran into that issue where we speak about mutual aid and then we end up doing what is very similar to charity, that there is mutual aid amongst people who have the time to dedicate to it, but then the community being served are not themselves getting involved in a mutual sense. And so we started trying to get past this, and especially 2021, we had a bit of time to slow down and think. People started returning to work, our capacity dropped, and with capacity dropping, we had to think about how to be more efficient. We started looking to existing community organizations already doing mutual aid. One good example is groups that are more focused in, say, I'll give one example is the Latin community. There are a few groups like that do immigrant rights stuff like Cosecha, a few groups that do labor concerns like Lazos and New Labor, and many of these groups do like mutual aid more organically, similar to like the Italian and the Jewish and the earlier examples discussed, is they already do mutual aid within their existing community. How can we connect these different groups that are doing mutual aid to work together more, to work between different communities beyond just particular ethnic enclaves? And so that was what we tried to do. Again, varying the levels of success. We worked with a few Filipino groups like the Bayan Network at various points. We worked with the Latin population. Different challenges start to arise when you do this is like run into language barriers. People who have the language skills start to be way more employable in terms of when like the pandemic ends, they return to work. And so tactics had to change. A number of things that groups will do at the start for mutual aid, like what can you do to start? You can do grocery deliveries like what happened during the pandemic, but that's very resource intensive. Good starting options are clothing swaps, brick-like clinics, tablings where you like hand out items and groceries in a group so that way it's more centralized, and having conversations with people, just like doing that initial like outreach, canvassing, outing, whatever you call it. A lot of different groups have tried different approaches for this, and it works well at getting feedback from what the community wants rather than presuming it from the start. It might be easy at the start, like, okay, everyone needs groceries, but afterwards, like, what are the concerns? We found out for example, in New Brunswick, the concern that comes up a lot is jobs. And that's something we can't really provide as a group of just like community activists. The next thing was housing concerns. And so that is something that can actually be addressed more easily. And so we started connecting more in regards to tenant organizing. And this meant looking into working with Centers for Legal Services. So groups that are institutional but are willing to work with more grassroots organizations, looking to the connection between institutional and non-institutional, and then building that power long-term. Other matters is attempting to become more efficient, but I guess those are not as important for the matter of general one-on-one mutual aid. So I think I went through most of the successes. This is more the internal side of things, but in regards to things to consider for groups trying to do mutual aid from the start is looking into what groups already exist, not even in mutual aid particularly, like labor groups, churches, schools, institutions. One good example for, say, the earlier homeless concern was we ran into a situation in New Brunswick where there was a Code Blue shelter which was being run for the homeless when there were conditions under 32. And as you mentioned before, they would kick people out when it went above it. So in the morning, it would slightly rise a bit, and so people would instantly get kicked out. And so people from the mutual aid groups, people from other mutual aid groups like Hope City Socialists got together, tried to petition and push, and a few angles can be approached. We approached it by directly going to city council and pressuring, trying to get the media involved. That didn't work. We tried going the other route of getting church groups involved, playing the churches against the city. This is something that goes a bit beyond the role of what mutual aid is doing sometimes, but it's connected. You do the political education. What do you do after you do the education? You start doing the organizing work sometimes. And it worked out to a degree. We managed to get the city to agree to shift the shelter to the churches instead. And then from there, that allowed us to start pushing for a broader shelter program, allowed us to start working with the church, which is a bit more minimal in some areas. And so a lot of mutual aid work is the community gardens, the cooperatives, this kind of stuff is very useful. But building power long-term can also be very important because there's only so much that we can push around in terms of resources within our existing communities. There's a lot that's segmented. There's a lot of people getting pushed out of cities in regards to gentrification, and so we have to get ahead of this sometimes. And so that's where getting these connections, doing the research is very important. That mutual aid is not just studying past mutual aid, but also looking very closely at the current conditions and the current relations of production within your own city. Who has power? Who can potentially be useful ally? Who potentially can be turned against mutual aid? So that's an example of that can be considered for the future as well. I think I went through some of the tasks. Crisis, yeah, that's a lot of the stuff we trade often. There's I guess in labor organizing, it's called hot shop incident. Things that are very inciting, there's Hurricane Ida, or there's a particular hurricane, people die of flooding. Groups in our case, Central Jersey Mutual Aid was reached out to, Princeton Mutual Aid, we heard also was reached out to in regards to assistance for flooding conditions because the city didn't have enough setup. That kind of work, doing that work ahead of time to build up that repetition. Groups will try to co-op. I heard if I remember Mutual Moors, they try to co-op. Some Trump groups try to co-op Mutual Moors. The city I mentioned earlier, Princeton. So doing this work can result in considerations of how do we maneuver with other organizations that are more powerful? How do we keep membership engaged and understanding why are we taking this strategy, this tactic? In regards to decision making, as mentioned before, consensus is often very useful. Consensus has limitations. For example, it takes time. If there are reactive, a lot of mutual aid is reactive to emergencies. And so you're running into these problems where you're trying to build a consensus and you're also having emergencies that they rush forward with. Building up relational organizing matters, making sure there's trust, everyone expects that everyone else is working in good faith, allows that consensus work to actually work. Sometimes defaulting to democracy, standard majority rules, becomes necessary in emergency cases. And sometimes there are critiques of both democracy and consensus models I've heard of, from pure anarchists of you should not do either because they're both still flawed and particular ways in regards to rule. In particular crises, people will just push forward in that kind of anarchic sense, and that can be necessary at times. But most of the time, consensus is the model used by most mutual aid groups, and we mostly go by it as well. But yeah, this is just our current events. Right now, a lot of our work is this stuff. So we've managed to see getting past some of the issues in the past of being purely charity by working more with groups that were Spanish-speaking predominantly, like Lazos, and making sure that all our tablings are always in company with a matter where it's mutual. We're getting the involvement of the community and not just giving out stuff. That was an issue a lot during the grocery deliveries during the pandemic. So good example options for getting the community involved is organizing conversations with community members that you're serving and trying to figure out what are their skills, what are their interests, what are the time availabilities, and trying to get their commitment so that they're also involved with the organizing. So it's not just a matter of charity, it's mutual. Good examples is Lazos in the past, during their work with refugee resettlement programs in Highland Park, they would try to go into the refugee groups and try to get a sense like, what were your skills before you fled your country? Like, were you a doctor? Were you a teacher? What can you be slotted into? And then from there, trying to build up that connection, getting them involved in whatever service model so that the mutual aid group can do both service and organizing and advocacy as needed. Our past work more recently has been also responsive to, again, more recent crises. We do know your rights trainings at the mutual aid tablings. We do tenant right concerns at the mutual aid tablings. People aren't going to work because they're scared of ICE, and so they don't have enough money to pay rent, and so that becomes a matter of both housing and labor concerns on top of general mutual issues. Civic engagement, art education, working youth programs, Lazos does a lot of that kind of area, and we work with them, learn from them, and the mutual aid can also be mutual between mutual aid groups. But yeah, that's most full. I don't think we have anything else. Just like hopes and goals. I think this is not as needed right now. Yeah. So yeah, that's any questions, comments, or like, and if you'd be interested in getting more involved, we work with Central Jersey DSA as a committee, and we work with a lot of our groups as well. So in the past, there was a 2022 Solidarity Convention, I believe, in Highland Park, and all the groups, like a bunch of mutual aid groups across the across the state came together, like Brick City, Mutual Moors, Jersey City, Food on Bombs, Princeton Mutual Aid, and Central Jersey Mutual Aid. And from there, like connections are still like they kind of frayed over time. People get tired, burnt out, but we still would stay in touch with all the groups, exchange tactics and stuff.
Felix, for the folks on YouTube, could you say the URL of your website?
Sure.
So they could type it in.
Wait, do we have a URL?
Just keep it up for a few more minutes, please.
Sure.
For the YouTube folks, we're getting the URL right now. Hold on another moment.
Does the next group is presenting the
I think it might just be us.
Oh, okay.
I was wondering if we want to, the four of us move up there and do a panel.
Sure.
If that works for you all.
Yeah. So,
All right, would you tell me that again?
central.dsanj.org. All right.
Great. Yeah, hold on. It's a little out of focus. Yeah, for the folks on YouTube, hopefully you're able to see that URL again. It's central.dsanj.org. Just like you see DSA on the screen there, it's dsanj.org. And then Elizabeth, somebody had asked the URL that you had up on your last frame, if you could read that out loud.
Absolutely. So that can be cool.
I am the absolute tech boomer, and Celia is the.
Slightly more technical. I don't want to overstate. It's linktr.ee, like the link tree / mutual oranges.
Great. And I'm just going to type that into the chat also.
LNKTR.EE/mutual oranges.
Perfect.
Let me see. What was the link again?
central.dsanj.org.
I'm gonna put. Let me see if it links back in. So I put 2 links on the screen. There we go. Right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Arial.
So do we want to start by telling our group's origin stories or by opening the floor for questions? What kind of, y'all have thoughts?
And if anybody on YouTube has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll read them out loud for you. There is a delay of almost 30 seconds, but I'm sure we could get around it.
I will start by introducing myself because I did not before,
Sorry
but
about it.
it's all good. My name is Celia. I am one of the core group members of Mutual Oranges. I came on board right after that first interest meeting. So I haven't been around quite as long as Elizabeth, but I've been with the group for a while.
And
Do
I'm
you have
always,
an email address or a phone number I could reach you at?
Yeah, I think you can just try the Mutual Oranges at proton.me.
And what was your name, ma'am?
Elizabeth.
Yes, just want to know the names of the people that were here today.
Sure. But yeah, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from up in Belleville in Essex County. And
Felix from New Brunswick area. Do most of my organizing in New Brunswick, Trenton, Bound Brook, and Edison, New York.
Is that an email address, mutualoranges@proton.me?
Yes.
That's one.
Yep,
every
that is our email address.
Central, and then centralgsn.org. I think I got.
The other contact on the site.
What was your name, sir?
My name is Felix.
Felix from.
New Brunswick. From Central Jersey Mutual Aid.
any questions, friends?
Just want to make sure I have all these things. I'm gonna need some mutual aid resources for my homeless shelter plans.
So I would love to hear both of y'all's origin stories, what drew you to mutual aid.
So for me, I am immunocompromised, and as many folks in the disabled community have also experienced, my world has really shrunk since the pandemic was declared over. Despite that political decision, it is not medically safe for me to be out and about living life the way that I was pre-2020. And most organizing spaces that I used to be in, and most communities that I was a part of, including some of the left-leaning spaces I was in, all abandoned precautions. And so I was in a position where I was having to decide whether or not to potentially severely compromise my health to engage with organizing, or basically just become totally isolated. And for a while I was very isolated, and then I saw on Instagram an event notification for, and I've been learning about mutual aid for a while, and interested in it for a while, but also feeling like it probably wasn't going to be accessible because no places were accessible anymore. And I was scrolling and I saw an event notification for the Mutual Aid 101 at the East Orange Public Library, and I live in Maplewood, so that's right in my neck of the woods. And I was thrilled. I was like, oh my goodness, this is like a unicorn. And so I got plugged in because I was interested in mutual aid, and also because I had virtually no community anymore because it had all kind of atrophied after the declaration that the pandemic was over. So it was kind of out of necessity and kind of out of interest. And I've said this a couple of times, but I feel like it has been life-saving for me. I have gotten a lot out of the work that we've done and the ways we've been able to support other people, but I also personally have immensely benefited from the community and support and connection that I've gotten as a member of Mutual Oranges.
I'll pass to you.
Sure. So I got involved with mutual aid because during the pandemic, it seemed like this was where a lot of people were getting organized, and I overall am interested in the work of building connections between different groups that have like similar interests in regards to working class interests, in regards to those that are exploited, oppressed, and so this was the main concern. I think one thing I noticed a lot, and it kind of follows from what you were mentioning earlier, is that people are good at caring about things for short periods of time. The most difficult thing sometimes is the consistency and follow-up. I see this for myself, see it in others, I see it in general. It's like something that's very difficult to do. One thing I noticed, even before getting involved in mutual aid, around 2020, you saw a couple of months, there were people who were like, everyone was quarantining, there was all that focus. And then it stayed within professional spheres, it stayed in existence for longer, until like maybe around mid-2021. That is not also very location to location. But when it came to a lot of working class people, they kind of just had to go back to work no matter what. And so they lost interest in keeping this up. Like if you went out on the streets in New Brunswick in say even August, nobody was wearing masks. It was already within a few months that people just kind of didn't care about it as much. Like they still took risks, but they were still getting sick from it. They were getting sick at work. There wasn't enough PPE. There were a lot of risks of like insufficient ventilation at workplaces. But people, even when it comes to their own safety, stop carrying out certain because it's pretty exhausting sometimes. I think that might be like that mental fatigue, and almost all organizing runs into that same issue of the most effective organizing is one that has follow-up, that has consistency, that can last throughout years, decades of work in order to build towards people's interests. But it can be exhausting, and so often it is good at, a lot of organizing and activism said is good at reacting to particular situations and then falling apart after the worst aspects of the situation I dealt with. But yeah, that's how I got involved.
I'd like to ask, this might have been on somebody's slides, and forgive me if it was, with the current state of immigration, whatever you want to call it. I was going to say crackdown, but it's so much more severe than that. Do any of your organizations offer legal services, or at least like connections to legal services?
No, we don't offer legal services. I work at a public defense organization, and I have for the past 9 years in Manhattan. So I know a decent amount about some criminal legal things, and I know some about some systems and systems of detainment. Also, my dad is an attorney, and so sometimes I have connected him with folks. But we also have been making an effort to identify and connect with organizations who are able to either provide that or more directly connect folks. Felix mentioned Cosecha earlier. We've been working with them a bit on something that has nothing to do with legal things, but that's a long-winded way of saying, no, not right now, but it's definitely something that we're thinking about.
I think for us, it's a similar situation. We don't ourselves provide legal services, but we do work with a lot of groups that do. For example, one of the big difficulties of the current situation is that the administration is using areas of, well, I mean, first off, they're ignoring the law in a couple areas, but where they are caring about the law, they're using areas that require specialty in both immigration and criminal justice matters. Like, not all lawyers are trained in both. Most specialize in some area, and then they might have multiple specialties, but that particular specialty, people are getting overwhelmed. The groups we do work with that have that specialty are groups that have a specialty in organizing matters, or Cosecha, Resistencia in Mercer area, New Labor in around New Brunswick, and Lazos. Groups that are legal aid specifically would be AFSC, American Friends Service Committee, the Quaker organizations up in Red Bank and Newark. They have a number of lawyers that help with immigration concerns. Dyer, off of the Highland Park area, working with Cosecha, they have a number of lawyers that have either labor specialty or immigration specialty. And the Endelon organizations, like the National Day Laborers Organizing Network. Yeah, that's correct. They also have lawyers. So we work with these 3 organizations. Yes, and then Lazos work with a few others, and we sometimes connect people to Lazos when it comes to legal aid concerns, especially Spanish speakers. So that's another area, is like trying to find the right lawyer who is also bilingual as needed. Immigration, I think is the immigration firm they use. But yeah, we work with a few groups when it comes to immigration concerns. And then for legal services outside of that, we work with sometimes Newark Law Clinic when it comes to general like aid and assistance, like and then Central Jersey Legal Services we refer people to for housing concerns and matters of like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare, like the financial side of things when it comes to like the food and basic survival needs side of the trade.
Okay. Would you maybe do me a favor? Would you type some of those organizations, and that way they could both see it on the screen, and I could also recopy it into the chat here?
Actually, should this text size. Any other questions at the moment?
No.
Elizabeth, how did you get involved in mutual aid?
I was not going to start anything new. Most of my career has been democratic free schools, which are schools where the students are free to choose how to spend their time, what to learn, and are part of the decision-making process. They're inspired by the anarchist schools of Spain. And that was enough for me. I was not starting anything new. I was not getting involved in any new endeavors. And I started attending events that Mutual Morris did. And at the end of last year, they very kindly and lovingly basically said to folks who weren't from Mutual Morris, dudes, this is supposed to be hyper-local. We love you. Get out. I mean, and so a bunch of us started talking about whether we wanted to start something in Essex County. And there's so much great stuff going on in Essex County. There are so many hyperlocal things in Newark and things in Montclair. And so what we wound up focusing on is the Oranges, because that is around where we all were. And for me, the narrative that I got growing up was, I'm 54. The narrative I got growing up was that by now I should be thinking about retirement. And the world in which you're saving for retirement now, and retirement is going to look anything like what it looked like for my parents, that world doesn't exist. If it ever did, it certainly doesn't anymore. And it seems to me that the best investment you can make is in community, because community allows you to pivot. If it's fascism, if it's climate emergency, if it's a pandemic, if it's whatever it is, the collapse of the economy, whatever it is, if you have community, you can pivot and you can figure out how to get each other through. And so that's what drew me to Germany Mutual Aid.
That is awesome. That also just made me think of a recommendation that I have for folks who are potentially interested but feel totally like out of their depth still. And this is one of the things that we did as a group. We're still a very young group, but one of the things that we did was together we read and then discussed mutual aid, Dean Spade's mutual aid. I don't remember how many parts we broke it down into and then came together to discuss, but that could be very helpful for, again, people who really feel interested and like they want to do this, and also like they aren't quite sure what practical steps to take, because that book really breaks down the like practical elements of mutual aid, and so that can help one, create that stable foundation that Elizabeth was talking about, and and just kind of focus your efforts and make sure that you're considering whatever organizational or logistical things you need to think about as a group. Like we, as a young group, are recognizing a number of things that we haven't yet encountered and are now having to build processes and protocols for, like finances. Like there are a lot of things that you don't necessarily think about, and so it is really helpful to lean on the resources that already exist, be that written or other forms of media or other groups that might be willing to provide sort of mentorship type stuff, which Mutual Morris has been doing for our group, which has been really lovely. But that can be a great starting place, and you don't have to know anything. I think that's something that's come up for me a bunch in this imposter syndrome, which is I think is, as a millennial, I think that's baked into so many aspects, the fibers of my being. But constantly feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't have any business being part of the core group of this meeting. Like I'm just learning all this stuff, and we're all just that's one of the beautiful parts of mutual aid, is like we're all just learning this stuff, and nobody is the ultimate authority on anything. We all have more to learn from one another and to teach one another, and actually sometimes it can be really great to not have an extensive background on something. Sometimes that means that you bring some of the freshest perspective that can like provide innovative insight that you otherwise wouldn't have had. Like we live in a world that very much is focused, that like very much praises and reinforces hierarchy, and it is very unusual but refreshing to be in a space that is so intentionally non-hierarchical. And it is funny the times that we sometimes run into some friction where we're recognizing like, oh, I'm so used to operating with a certain set of standard, like I'm used to operating hierarchically in these sorts of scenarios. How actually are we navigating this when nobody is making the ultimate, like how are we deciding this, and how do you determine which decisions, like we talked about consensus earlier and how there can be the time constraints. Like, are there then some decisions that are time sensitive, and are we recognizing that maybe in those scenarios we have an alternative way where we have a majority vote in that situation, or where they're like, where do we need to be flexible and fluid? And that is it's really cool and refreshing, especially in a world that is becoming increasingly rigid and punitive.
I had in my promoting of this program tonight, I had said that this mutual aid, I wanted to be on people's mind as an alternative to Giving Tuesday tomorrow. So now if there are people who are raring to go, what's something that they should do tomorrow?
I mean, I would say write your elevator speech. Write your 3-sentence thing and start telling everyone you work with, everyone in your family, hey, I'm interested in getting started with mutual aid. Here's why. What sparked? So let's say that today sparked something in you. What did it spark? Put together 3 sentences, 5 sentences, and start telling people. Is that me? Oh no, that's not me. Okay. I went to this thing on mutual aid. I'm really interested in getting started. You want to get started with me? I think all you need is one other person to get started. If you want to, I noticed that there are never any menstrual products in the bathroom at work. Do you want to help me make sure that they're in every bathroom in the building? Or I noticed that transportation to church is an issue. Who wants to help me figure out how we can all get to church every week that we want to, regardless of bus or regardless of...
This family member has a surgery coming up. Can you help me coordinate a meal train so that we know that they're eating well during whatever their recovery period is?
Or do you want to read mutual aid with me? Or again, the Shareable website has a load of videos on how mutual aid works, on consensus decision making, on finances and legal aspects of mutual aid. Do you want to read this with me? So find one person. I would say write your elevator speech. Talk to everybody, and as soon as you get one person who's like, "Oh my God, yes!" Just pick something and do it together.
Is there a question over here?
I was wondering, how are you getting volunteers to stay engaged and keep coming back, to help out over and over again?
Do you want to take that or?
I've never been good at that part. It's a matter of finding tasks. Once you get past that initial portion, you have the initial outreach, you have these initial conversations. You do either, whether it's within existing community groups, so it could be church network within the workplace, or you just find friends who don't really share a particular constituency or group, but you do whatever that initial outreach is. The next thing is planning, and for at least my approach, is planning and finding tasks that are delegatable and getting a checklist of them, finding things that people who are not already fully certain what is to be done next, always having a list of stuff that they can do that is very bite-sized. For this week, they're going to be focused on looking into the potential friendly groups that could work on the shelter program, or looking into a successful case in Tennessee, or looking into this and reading up and writing a report on it. That's a simple 1-2 week thing they can do. And they can work with it. They can work with others. They can bring people on board. Making sure that they attend the tabling, and they're bottom lining the matter of bringing toilet paper or whatever, bringing paper towels, bringing hygiene supplies, bringing groceries. Getting them engaged in that method tends to work for me, but as I mentioned, I'm not the greatest at it, because I often see that approach works for a midterm period, and then there needs to be something more in order to keep people engaged. I think that's a community relational aspect that I'm not as good at, but maybe you guys have any ideas?
It's tricky for us too. We also, again, are very new as a group, and the discussion of membership has been kind of an ongoing discussion for us. For a while, our focus was all laying the foundation, defining ourselves as a group. So a large part of this year has been, before we even got to that point, being all right, who are we when we're going out there saying, hey, come join us? How are we describing ourselves? What are our values? What do we? So we've spent a lot of time really ironing that out. I think that is an essential part of that, is making sure that then when you're getting to the point where you're communicating to other people, we have found, I mean, we've been throwing things at walls. So we try like different platforms. So we'll send messages out on like Discord and Signal and text messages and email. We have a mailing list. We just created an Instagram and we just created the link tree. So hopefully that will help with some stuff. We created a new membership interest form that has links to some of our our core values and some of our like decision making and procedural stuff, so people get a chance to learn a little bit about us as a group. We at one point had a core group member who was much more socially inclined than Elizabeth and I are, and she would individually reach out to our community members when we were planning something or had a big decision or wanted input from the general group. And we generally found that it was most successful when we had the capacity to have someone individually reaching out to our community members and asking for them to weigh in on things. We currently do not have the capacity to be individually reaching out to our community members, but we would love to get back to that place. I think a big thing is establishing a culture of communication and trying to have that be ongoing, and just regularly checking in with people about what their capacity is, how that's fluctuating, what their needs are, if there are ways that they can be supported by the community. And I think also just gently shepherding everyone, including yourself, into a space where you're more comfortable receiving support as well as giving support. I think once I recognized how much support I was also receiving from the group, I felt hooked in a different way.
Great. All right, I think we are going to wrap it up. I very much appreciate all of you being here, so thank you so much. I think this information was great, and I hope that everybody here and on our YouTube audience have some ideas about how they can just better their communities. I think we all need that right now. So thank you all again. I will, in a moment, put the camera a little bit closer to the screen so anybody at home can see the information that's been typed on there. So coming up at the Edison Library, this Sunday, there is a Latin duo named Serenata from New York who are going to come in and perform. They were supposed to be here in October and we had to postpone for that state of emergency. So this is that same group that was advertised back then. I think I'm not in the camera. Who cares? Next Monday, we have a documentary about the marijuana industry and people who had been arrested for selling or possessing and are now kind of locked out of the legal industry and who are trying to become a part of it again. And the week after that, we have Hanukkah Around the World, an interview with an Ethiopian woman and her celebration of Hanukkah. And this Wednesday, our Broadway-themed movie is Some Like It Hot. Thank you all very much. Thank you for everyone at home, their patience with all the audio situations. And thank you all again. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.